Turn now, though, to some new reporting that reveals the Pentagon has been planning a military deployment to Chicago for weeks now. Officials familiar with the matter tell the Washington Post the department is considering several options, including mobilizing at least a few thousand members of the National Guard to the city, perhaps as soon as next month. President Trump mentioned Chicago on Friday while speaking to reporters in the Oval Office.
Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent, and we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this, and it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come.
In an interview yesterday, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson said the move would be unconstitutional and costly. And Joe Mika, just moments ago, President Trump took to Truth Social to again defend what he's doing in D.C. and suggest Chicago could be next.
Well, the thing is, again, we've talked about D.C. We've talked about, David, in my opinion, that if you had a federal government that teamed up and had a partnership with D.C., that would be a positive thing. It's something that I've wanted to see since the 1990s. What we have here is a declared emergency, and we have troops that have gone in there, and they're not in places where crime is so rampant in D.C. They aren't in the most affected areas.
Partnership is not happening.
Well, yeah, partnership's not happening. Also, a lot of people saying that this is just for show.
We've been looking at the data. We've been working with WRC, our local affiliate in Washington, and there's the arrests and the types of arrests are typical that you'd see. There's a mix of sort of low-level crime and more serious crime, but there's no giant crime wave that this deployment is stopping. It's sort of the slow drop in crime that's been occurring in D.C. for a while. And it's true. We talked to one former law enforcement official who said a lot of people will get off the streets when there's a surge of officers or National Guard on the streets, but what you need are like long-term, thorough investigations that take down gangs and serious criminals and put them in jail. That involves federal funding and cooperation.
Well, and the federal government
community connection.
And the federal government has cut $1 billion from D.C. funding.
So yeah, there's this equation happening here. We take away the money and then put in the feds. Let's bring in executive director for the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection at Georgetown Law, Mary McCord. She's also former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the Justice Department. So how would you characterize what is happening in D.C. and potentially Chicago next?
Well, we have a couple of different things going on, and it's important for everyone to know that D.C. is very different than any other city or in any other state because of the relationship between the federal government and the local police in this federal enclave. Under the Home Rule Act, the president has the authority when he declares that there is a state of an emergency to actually request services of the Metropolitan Police Department, and those must be provided. He can't do that in places like Chicago or Baltimore or New York City. So he's left there with whatever authorities he might have under the National Guard authorities or the military authorities. In D.C., he's the commander of the D.C. National Guard. He can call them up, as he has done. He can ask for other state governors to send their National Guards under Title 32 of the U.S. Code, which means they're technically still under the command and control of those governors, which means, and this is why this matters, which means they would not be in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act if they were to actually engage in domestic law enforcement. None of that would apply in another state. In another state, you would need the consent of the governor to use the National Guard. You would need the consent of the governor to send in National Guards from another state if they remained under those other state governors' control. That would be like one state invading another state without its authority.
Where do you expect the legal challenges to come, let's say, if troops are sent in to Chicago, which, as you said, quite dramatically different than what's happening in Washington, D.C. for a variety of reasons, especially when you could name dozens of cities in red state America, mid-sized towns in red state America who actually have a higher crime rate per capita than Chicago does.
Yeah, it depends on what authorities are used, right? If he tries to use this Title 232 authority, I think there are significant challenges that the state of Illinois could bring if it was over the objection of the governor. And Governor Pritzker has been pretty clear that he hasn't asked for help and doesn't think any help from National Guard units is necessary. The president could try to do something like he did in LA, use Title 10 of the U.S. Code, Section 12406, to actually federalize the National Guard and use other authorities to send in the military. Remember, in the Marines, in the LA, he sent in the Marines to protect federal functions. And that also could be subject to some challenges. We certainly saw Governor Newsom make those challenges. But what was different there is that was at least purported to be a federalization to protect ICE in executing federal immigration law. Right now, what the president is saying about Chicago and Baltimore and other places is that it's a crime issue, like a general violent crime issue. And that is a completely different thing than support of the execution of federal immigration law. So we'll have to see what sorts of rationale the president uses if he does do this and what authorities he invokes. And then we can assess what the potential challenges are. But the federal government does not have the policing power over local law and state law. That is left by the Constitution to the states.
And again, just moments ago, the president defending his approach in Washington, and the White House has advised he has an event on crime later today. I suspect we'll be hearing more about this.